I'll never forget the first time I met Sarah. It was a chilly autumn evening in Boston, a kind of evening when the wind carries secrets and the city lights flicker like scattered stars. I was running late for a friend's small gathering, and as fate would have it, I dashed into a tiny coffee shop on Newbury Street. Little did I know that coffee shop would mark the beginning of one of the most unpredictable chapters of my life. I pushed open the door, the bell chiming above me, and almost collided with a woman who was gracefully balancing a tray of hot lattes. In that brief moment, time slowed. Her eyes met mine, sparkling with both surprise and amusement. "Sorry," I blurted out, stepping back as the tray wobbled dangerously. She smiled, a warm, inviting smile that immediately put me at ease. "No harm done," she said in a gentle tone. "I'm Sarah, by the way." "I'm Mark," I replied, still a bit flustered, trying to steady both my nerves and the wobbling tray. We exchanged a few quick words about how the wind outside was playing tricks on us, and how life sometimes had a way of throwing unexpected collisions into your path. I left the shop that night with my heart unexpectedly light. Over the following weeks, fate, or perhaps pure coincidence, seemed determined to have our paths cross. One rainy afternoon, I found myself taking refuge in the same coffee shop. There she was, curled up with a book near the window. This time I mustered up the courage to sit at the table next to hers. "What are you reading?" I asked, nodding toward the well-worn paperback. Sarah looked up, a playful glimmer in her eyes. "Something about life's little ironies and how we always seem to miss the obvious until it's too late," she replied. I laughed, thinking of our previous collision. We ended up talking for nearly 2 hours, about books, dreams, and the small absurdities that make each day unique. That conversation felt less like a chance meeting, and more like a long overdue catch-up with an old friend. A couple of dates later, we decided to go for dinner at a quaint Italian restaurant off the beaten path. I wanted everything to be perfect, so I arrived early, dressed with a little too much hope and a lot of nerves. I even rehearsed a few witty lines in my head, but as soon as Sarah walked in, the universe decided to play a little prank. It started with the waiter, an overly enthusiastic fellow who tripped as he approached our table, sending a splash of red wine across the tablecloth. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, we both froze. Then, instead of the awkward silence I'd expected, we burst out laughing. The waiter apologized profusely, but the damage was already done, in the best possible way. That spilled wine became a metaphor for the unpredictable messiness of life, and we found ourselves discussing how sometimes the best memories come from the unplanned, messy moments. Emboldened by our shared ability to laugh at life's mishaps, Sarah and I planned a weekend road trip to explore the scenic countryside. We crammed into my aging sedan, the trunk barely holding the suitcases, a cooler, and a questionable amount of snacks. The drive was filled with our playful debates over the best roadside diners and the oddest local attractions. At one point, as we cruised along a winding road flanked by brilliant fall foliage, our car began to sputter and finally died in the middle of nowhere. Instead of frustration, we looked at each other and started laughing uncontrollably. "This is just like our first meeting, isn't it?" Sarah joked. We spent the next hour stranded by the roadside, sharing stories and watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. In that unexpected pause, I realized that every setback was really an opportunity to connect on a deeper level. That same weekend, after our impromptu roadside adventure, we decided to camp under the stars. With a small tent, a crackling fire, and an endless expanse of night above us, our conversation turned reflective. We talked about past relationships, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, the lessons learned, and our hopes for the future. The crisp night air and the sound of crickets provided a soothing backdrop to our candid confessions. "Sometimes," Sarah said softly, "I think the universe brings people together, not because everything is perfect, but because it wants us to learn how to be imperfect together." I couldn't have said it better myself. There, under that starry sky, we made a silent promise to embrace all of life's unpredictability together, its joys, its messes, and its unexpected detours. As our relationship deepened, life, as always, continued to throw curveballs our way. A few months into our journey, a misunderstanding emerged that threatened to cast a shadow over our newfound closeness. I had been working long hours at a new job, and Sarah felt increasingly isolated. One evening, after a particularly rough day, she stormed out of our apartment without a word. I spent the night worrying, replaying every conversation and every missed signal. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "I need some time to figure things out. Please don't call me." The silence that followed was deafening. I wandered the city, head in a fog of regret and anxiety, until I stumbled upon a small park bench near a familiar coffee shop. As I sat there, the gentle patter of rain offered a strange kind of solace. After what felt like an eternity, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Can we talk?" We met at that same coffee shop, the place where it all began. In a quiet corner, over steaming cups of coffee, we talked. I apologized for my absence, for not noticing how much she was hurting. Sarah admitted that she'd felt invisible and alone. We both realized that in our pursuit of personal dreams and ambitions, we'd forgotten the simplest truth, that love thrives on communication, even when it's messy. It wasn't an easy conversation, and there were plenty of tears. But by the end, we understood that our love wasn't the kind that shone in perfect moments alone. It was forged in the trials, the laughter, and the honest admissions of our own vulnerabilities. After that difficult day, we both knew that rebuilding trust and closeness would require effort. We decided to make a pact. Once a week, we would have a no-judgment night, a night dedicated solely to sharing our most ridiculous, embarrassing stories from the past. The first session was an absolute riot. I recounted the time I accidentally wore 2 different shoes to an important presentation, and Sarah shared her hilarious misadventure of accidentally replying all to a company email with a personal rant. These nights became a cherished ritual. They reminded us that laughter could dissolve the toughest of tensions and that humor was a key ingredient in our relationship recipe. Time passed, and as seasons changed, so did we. Our love evolved from the thrill of new beginnings to the steady comfort of a shared life, complete with imperfections. We moved into a new apartment with creaky floors and leaky faucets, but every drip and every creak was a reminder that our home was built on real, lived-in moments. One crisp winter evening, while cooking dinner together, yes, we had come a long way from that chaotic Italian restaurant, I looked over at Sarah as she chopped vegetables with a concentration that made her look almost comical. "You know," I said, "our life is a series of unscripted moments." Sarah paused, her eyes twinkling in the soft kitchen light. "And I wouldn't have it any other way," she replied. We clinked our wine glasses and laughed, fully aware that our future would be filled with more mishaps, more unexpected detours, and most importantly, more moments of genuine connection. Looking back, I realized that our journey wasn't defined by grand gestures or picture-perfect dates. Instead, it was the little things, the shared smiles over spilled wine, the comfort of a quiet conversation after a misunderstanding, and the joy of embracing life's absurdities together. Our story wasn't scripted. It was a living, breathing testament to the unpredictable beauty of love. And as I sit here now, years later, I'm grateful for every twist, every turn, and every moment of laughter that brought us closer. Because in a world where nothing is certain, the one thing that always remained true was our ability to find humor and heart in the everyday chaos of life.